Hello, dear viewers. Today I'm going to be talking about the Brazilian elections and the protests that have erupted due to it. Let's begin. Last week, the Brazilian elections happened, and Jair Bolsonaro lost, and Lula da Silva won. I wanted to wait until a week because there have been accusations of voter fraud and there have been protests against this result. And so I want to get all the information before I make my video and come to conclusions. So in this video, I'll be examining uh, the vote tallies, the percentages, where they won, and I'll also look at the how the protests are panning out and what their demands are, the role of the military, etc. So I'll now continue. So this is Jair Bolsonaro, the current president of Brazil. He came to power in 2018, again against De Silva, who was his opponent, and he is a populist, a nationalist populist, and so I supported him during these elections. Not that I'm involved in the Brazilian elections in any way, but I just had sympathies with him and just gave him some support because I thought he was better for Brazil. He was good in their economy grew and they've recovered from the pandemic, although I do think his handling of the pandemic was very poor, and I don't blame him for not having lockdowns or mask mandates, but I do think that he could have got medicines quicker, transported them faster. He could have um, also done other things, such and that could have helped. And so the mass death that occurred in the pandemic is partly his responsibility, and also partly the responsibility of the governments, the state governments of Brazil. And then the other things about him, that he supports capitalism, he's against socialism, and liberalize the Brazilian economy, and was, as far as his foreign policy was concerned, he was more pro US than other Brazilian uh, rulers and governments, especially when President Trump was in office in the US. But once Biden took power, Biden became was a bit hostile towards him. Not just Biden individually, but the entire U.S. establishment, including the media and Hollywood. They were very against him, and this created a very bad image of him in the global media. And I think that this affected how Brazilians viewed him. This is Lula da Silva, the opponent. He was also the president before Bolsonaro. However, he resigned after he was accused and charged with corruption charges, and he was later sentenced and to several years imprisonment for corruption. But during Bolsonaro's term in office, sometime a little over a year ago, the Supreme Court found that uh, his trial was done improperly and that there were some technical errors made, and so acquitted him. Therefore, he was eligible to run again in the election. And I think because the Brazilian media, what I've heard from others, from what people say in Brazil, not directly, but I've read from Brazilian commentators online, is that The Brazilian media, like other countries, is very left biased, and so they provide very favorable coverage to the Silva and very negative coverage to Bolsonaro, which would have made Brazilian people believe that he was better than Bolsonaro, which is wrong. The media should be impartial and should just report the facts of an election. And yeah, and then so Lula got 50.1% of the votes and Bolsonaro got 49.10% of the votes. So this shows that the vote was very close. Now, in Brazil, elections divide the country into federative units. Lula won 14 of them and Bolsonaro won 14 of them. So we can see that throughout the country they were both evenly popular. The country was not in majority favoring either one. And as for the legislature, 99 seats went in the Chamber of Deputies, 99 seats went to Bolsonaro's party, the Liberal Party, and he also got 13 seats in the federal Senate, which is a majority, or at least I think it is, I'm not sure. And this outperformed what the polls predicted. So it shows that the polls were wrong. The polls were also wrong for the first and second rounds of voting because they thought Bolsonaro would lose by much more. Although they got right that Lula did win, they got wrong the margin of his victory. Which is a similar problem in India. I'm not sure why poll organizations seem to make this mistake. And so we can see that Brazil is very divided, although on the question of Bolsonaro, but on the question of the legislation, they were pretty much in very willing to favor the Liberal Party. They wanted them to have the power of the legislature. It's a little like the US 2020 election when Republicans won most the governors and they won a lot of seats in the Senate and the House but did not get a majority. But they lost the presidency. So it shows that somehow there's a similarity between both elections. I'll talk about that later. Now, in Brazil, Bolsonaro supporters have come out on the streets to protest against the results. They claim that there was voter fraud and they don't want So here we can see that Steve Bannon, Alex Jones, and on the bottom is Andrew Turmand. Steve Bannon was an advisor to Donald Trump when he was president. Alex Jones is a host of a radio show and an online YouTube show, online show called InfoWars. And Andrew Turmand is an analyst in Brazil. I don't think he's Brazilian though, but I'm not sure. all these three have questioned results in Brazil and believe that Bolsonaro should challenge it. And yeah, I really don't know what should be done. What I do know is that right now, Brazil must follow their country's national slogan of order and progress. They must have order and must follow the constitution. In Constitution of Brazil, the laws of Brazil say that whoever gets more votes in the election wins the elections, and so they should come to power. And so Bolsonaro must step down, but there must be progress as well. Progress would mean improving the voting system, making sure that the media is unbiased, making sure that any fraud committed is punished. That will be progress. So I think Brazilians, Bolsonaro supporters, need to follow that. I don't think that they should stop the Lula from coming to power. That because even if they think he's terrible, if he's terrible, then in a few years' time, the rest other Brazilians, his voters will realize that and would vote for him again. So yeah, that's what I think they need to do. So yeah, I think that Bolsonaro should step down, which he said he would. He would follow the constitution, but he has not conceded, which I think is good. If there has been fraud, then he should not say that he's lost, because that would be admitting that it was a fair election, that he lost fairly, which he didn't. I don't, not saying he didn't, but I'm not sure that he did. I've seen Andrew Termond, his analysis has shown that there were several anomalies, that statistical anomalies. For example, in the regions where in if you had compared the how he's basically showed how the votes that were given to Bolsonaro and De Silva in several uh, local races were tallied in the same manner, in the same ratio, which he thought was suspicious, and I do too. I think that's suspicious. Also, there were other counts such as um, basically votes suddenly increasing from one part of a state while the rest of the state votes for Bolsonaro. So there are anomalies, which I think the Brazilian electoral system, whatever body governs elections in Brazil, should take a look into that and should audit the election. From what I know, the Brazilian military can audit elections, and I think they should audit this one. That way, everyone will know if it was fair and or not, and if it was fair, then Bolsonaro will have to admit defeat, and if it was not, then I think there would have to be a re-election, no other choice. So that's what I think should happen. I just want to finish this video by wishing good luck to the people of Brazil. Thank. If you want to see other videos related to elections, click on this playlist. If you want to see my previous video, click here. If you want to see the sources I use for this video, click the links in the description below. Thank you for watching. Vande Mataram.